The morning sky over New York City changed from blue to silver in less than 10 minutes. People stopped walking on the streets and looked up. Office workers pressed their faces against windows. Children pointed from school playgrounds. Nobody had ever seen anything like it before. The ships were massive. Each one was bigger than 3 football stadiums put together. They hung in the air without making any sound. No engines roaring, no wind from propellers, just silence. The ships had smooth, curved surfaces that reflected sunlight like mirrors. Strange blue lights pulsed along their sides in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Similar ships appeared over London, Tokyo, Moscow, and every major city on Earth at exactly the same time. The world's governments tried to contact them using every radio frequency they could think of. They sent signals in every language and even tried mathematics. For 6 hours, the ships just floated there, watching. Admiral Zefter stood on the command deck of his flagship, studying the small blue planet below. His 4 eyes moved independently as he examined the data streams flowing across holographic displays. This was his 400th first contact mission. He had done this so many times that he could predict exactly how it would go. First, the primitive species would panic, then they would try to communicate. After that, they would attempt some kind of pathetic military response. Finally, they would surrender when they realized how outmatched they were. It always happened the same way. Always, the humans were following the pattern perfectly so far. His sensors showed massive chaos in their communication networks. Their military forces were scrambling around like insects when someone kicks their nest. Perfect. Zefter had studied the human species for months before arriving. They were young, barely out of their home system. They still used chemical rockets and fought wars with metal projectiles. Their technology was at least 500 years behind the Galactic Confederation's most basic equipment. This would be the easiest conquest of his career. The Confederation had been expanding across the galaxy for over 2,000 years. They brought order to chaos. They united primitive species under their wise rule. They shared technology and knowledge. Most species were grateful to join them. The few that resisted at first always saw reason eventually. Humans would be no different. At exactly noon, Earth time, Zefter activated the communication array. His image appeared on every television screen, computer monitor, and phone display on the planet. He spoke in perfect English, though his translator could handle over 3,000 human languages. "People of Earth," he said, his voice carrying the authority of 400 successful conquests. "I am Admiral Zefter of the Galactic Confederation Fleet. Your planet has been selected for integration into our vast alliance of civilized worlds." He paused, letting the words sink in. This was always the most important moment. The tone had to be firm but not threatening, confident but not cruel. "We offer you the gifts of advanced technology, interstellar travel, and membership in the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. Your weapons cannot harm our ships. Your military cannot oppose our forces. Resistance will only bring unnecessary suffering." The Admiral gestured to something off-screen. On Earth, people watched as smaller ships detached from the main fleet. These were half the size of the motherships, but still enormous by human standards. They moved toward the planet's surface with smooth, controlled movements. "We will establish administrative centers in your major cities. Your leaders will be given 72 hours to formally surrender. This is not a negotiation. This is an opportunity for your species to join the galactic community peacefully." The transmission ended. Zefter turned to his tactical officer, a tall being with gray skin and no visible mouth. "Begin the standard occupation protocol. Deploy forces to secure government buildings and military installations. Disable their communication satellites. Show them that resistance is pointless." The tactical officer's head tentacles twitched in what passed for a nod among his species. "Admiral, our intelligence suggests these humans have over 190 separate nations. Their command structure appears completely fractured. This may be even easier than usual." Zefter allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Fractured command meant no coordinated resistance. It meant confusion and infighting among the humans while his forces established control. Perfect. The first landing ships touched down in Central Park, Red Square, and a dozen other symbolic locations around the world. Confederation troops emerged wearing powered armor that could stop anything in the human arsenal. Their weapons fired energy beams that could cut through tank armor like paper. Their shields could deflect any projectile the humans might throw. At them. Everything went according to plan for the first 3 days. Human military forces attacked the landing sites with everything they had. Tanks fired their biggest shells at Confederation soldiers. Fighter jets dropped their most powerful bombs. Infantry units tried desperate charges with rifles and grenades. Nothing worked. The alien shields absorbed every impact. The energy weapons cut through human vehicles like a hot knife through butter. In Washington, D.C., President Martinez watched the reports from the Pentagon's Situation Room. Every attack had failed. The aliens had taken control of the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and the Capitol building without losing a single soldier. Similar scenes played out in every major capital. "Madam President," said General Thompson, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, "we need to consider surrender. Our weapons are useless against them. We're just getting our people killed." Martinez stared at the screens showing alien troops patrolling American streets. Part of her knew the general was right. But another part of her, the part that remembered her grandfather's stories about fighting impossible odds in World War II, wasn't ready to give up. "Not yet," she said quietly. "Give me 48 hours. What the Confederation didn't understand was that human governments were only part of the picture. While presidents and prime ministers debated surrender, other forces were already moving. In the mountains of Afghanistan, tribal leaders who had fought every occupying force for centuries looked at the alien ships and saw just another invader. In the favelas of Brazil, gang leaders who controlled territories the police couldn't enter began planning. In the rural areas of Texas, militia groups that had been preparing for government oppression suddenly found a real enemy. Dr. Sarah Shun sat in her destroyed office at Beijing University, looking at footage of alien soldiers walking through Tiananmen Square. As a professor of military history, she had spent her life studying how smaller forces defeated larger ones. David versus Goliath, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Northern Ireland. The aliens had superior technology, but they were following standard military doctrine. They took strategic points. They established supply lines. They tried to control population centers. They were fighting the last war, not this war. Sarah pulled out her laptop and began typing. She uploaded her thoughts to social media, to military forums, to anywhere people might read them. The message was simple: stop fighting like the army. These aliens expect to face. Similar messages began appearing everywhere. A former Navy SEAL posted detailed instructions for making explosives from household chemicals. A computer programmer explained how to build jammers using garage sale electronics. A high school chemistry teacher shared formulas for compounds that might disrupt energy fields. The aliens had planned for military resistance. They had not planned for 7 billion humans suddenly becoming soldiers. On the fourth day, Confederation forces reported their first anomalies: unexplained power outages in secured areas, communication disruptions that didn't match any known human technology, supply convoys finding roads blocked by seemingly random accidents. Admiral Zefter reviewed the reports with growing confusion. These humans were supposed to have surrendered by now. Instead, the resistance seemed to be growing stronger. Worse, it was becoming impossible to predict where attacks would come from next. The humans weren't following any logical military strategy. They were improvising, adapting, learning from every failed attack. They were turning their weakness into their strength. For the first time in 400 conquests, Admiral Zefter began to wonder if he had made a mistake. 6 months had passed since the aliens arrived. The world looked very different now. Most major cities had Confederation checkpoints on every corner. Alien soldiers in their shiny armor walked through streets that used to be filled with humans. Giant ships hung over every capital like metal clouds that never moved. but something was wrong with the conquest. Admiral Zefter stared at reports that made no sense. His forces controlled all the important buildings. They had all the weapons. They had technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans could build. So why were they losing soldiers? Every single day, the humans had stopped fighting like an army. Instead, they fought like water. When the aliens built a wall, humans flowed around it. When they blocked a road, humans found 10 other ways through. When they secured a building, humans attacked from directions that didn't exist on any military map. Captain Sarah Chun crouched in a tunnel beneath Beijing. The subway system had become her highway. Her army, her weapon. What the aliens saw as transportation, humans saw as the perfect place to hide, move, and strike. The tunnels connected everything. They went everywhere. And the aliens couldn't watch all of them at once. Sarah's team was small. Only 12 people, but they weren't trying to win big battles. They were trying to make the aliens afraid, make them waste time, make them use resources on problems that didn't matter. Tonight's target was simple. The aliens had built a communication relay on top of the old CCTV building. It sent signals to their ships and coordinated their forces across the city. Military thinking said you needed missiles or bombs to destroy something like that. Human thinking said you needed creativity. Li Wei, a 19-year-old engineering student, had figured out the solution. The aliens used energy fields to protect their equipment. But energy fields needed power, and power came through cables. Cables that ran through buildings that humans had built. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. While the aliens watched, for attacks from outside, Li Wei and 2 others would enter the building through the sewage system. They would find the power cables and inject them with a mixture of salt water and metal filings. The aliens' own protective systems would create feedback loops that would fry their equipment from the inside. It had taken Li Wei 3 weeks to figure out how alien technology worked. Not by studying their science, but by watching what happened. When their systems failed, when rain got into their equipment, when power fluctuations hit their shields, when heat made their metal expand in ways they hadn't planned for, the aliens built things to work perfectly under perfect conditions. Humans built things to work when everything went wrong. Sarah watched through a periscope as Li Wei's team disappeared into a maintenance tunnel. She spoke into a radio made from parts of a broken television and a child's toy. Dragon team is moving. All other teams hold position. Across the city, 40 other small groups waited. Each had their own target. Each had their own plan. But they were all connected by a network that the aliens still didn't understand. The network wasn't made of computers or radios. It was made of people. Children who carried messages between neighborhoods. Elderly people who watched from windows and counted alien patrols. Shop owners who left signs in their windows to show if areas were safe or dangerous. The aliens had technology that could break any code and intercept any signal. But they couldn't break a system where a grandmother hanging laundry in a certain way meant enemy patrol coming, and a street musician playing a specific song meant all clear. 800 kilometers away in Shanghai, Shenwu received Sarah's signal through a chain of 5 people. A food delivery driver had seen the grandmother's laundry. He told a barber who told a taxi driver who told a teacher who finally told Chunwu. The message was simple. Beijing team is active. Execute your plan, Chunwu smiled. His plan was even simpler than Li Wei's. The aliens had taken over the Shanghai Stock Exchange to use as a command center. They thought the building was perfect because it had good security and strong walls. They didn't know that Chunwu had helped design the building's air conditioning system 20 years ago. The aliens breathed a different mix of gases than humans. Their environmental suits filtered Earth's air to give them what they needed. But the filters had to be cleaned and replaced regularly, and they had to be stored somewhere safe and clean. Like an air conditioning system that was sealed from outside contamination, Chunwu's team had been putting tiny amounts of human perfume into the air conditioning system for 2 weeks. Not enough to notice, not enough to hurt anyone, just enough to slowly contaminate every replacement filter in the building. When the aliens changed their filters tonight, they would breathe chemicals that would make them dizzy and confused for hours. In London, former SAS soldier James Fletcher was preparing an even stranger attack. The aliens had turned Buckingham Palace into their European headquarters. They had energy shields, motion sensors, and weapons that could track a fly at 1,000 meters. Breaking in was impossible. So Fletcher wasn't going to break in. He was going to make them come out. For 3 months, Fletcher had been studying alien behavior. He noticed that they followed very strict schedules. They always did the same things, at the same times. They checked their perimeter every 6 hours. They changed their guards every 8 hours. They tested their communications every 12 hours. The aliens thought this made them secure. Fletcher thought it made them predictable. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Fletcher's team would create 17 small emergencies around London. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would hurt civilians. Just enough noise and confusion to make the aliens think they were under major attack. Fire alarms at 17 different buildings. Car alarms going off in perfect sequence. Emergency broadcasts on every radio station. While the aliens rushed around the city chasing fake threats, Fletcher's real team would walk into Buckingham Palace through the front door. Dressed as cleaning staff, carrying mops and vacuum cleaners filled with electronic devices that would record everything the aliens said and did. The beautiful part was that the aliens would never know. They had been infiltrated. The listening devices looked like ordinary dust. The recording equipment was hidden inside cleaning supplies. By the time the aliens figured out what had happened, humans would know their schedules, their codes, and their weaknesses. In Mexico City, Maria Santos was preparing the strangest attack of all. She was going to defeat alien technology using traditional Mexican cooking. The aliens had built their fortress on top of the old cathedral. Their energy shields protected them from bullets and bombs, but energy shields were designed to stop fast-moving objects. They weren't designed to stop slow-moving objects that looked harmless. Maria had discovered this by accident. She had been throwing food scraps to pigeons when an alien patrol passed by. The bread bounced off their personal shields, but the honey she had spilled on the bread stuck to the shield surface and slowly began to seep through. If honey could get through energy shields, then other sticky things could too. Things like molten chocolate, sticky rice, maple syrup, substances that would coat their equipment and slowly work their way into moving parts. Maria's team had spent weeks perfecting their recipe, a mixture of honey, corn syrup, and industrial adhesive that would stick to anything and slowly eat through metal. They would launch it using balloons. Hundreds of balloons filled with their special mixture. The aliens would see slow-moving balloons as harmless. By the time they realized what was happening, their equipment would be covered in substance that would take days to clean off, but the real genius was in the timing. All these attacks would happen at exactly the same moment. Beijing, Shanghai, London, Mexico City, and 40 other cities around the world. The aliens would face dozens of different types of attacks using dozens of different methods. Their computer systems were designed to find patterns and respond to threats. But there was no pattern to find when every attack was completely different. Admiral Zefter was about to learn the most important lesson about fighting humans. They didn't have better technology. They didn't have better training. They didn't have better weapons. But they had something the Confederation had never encountered before. They had imagination. At exactly midnight, Greenwich Mean Time, the second phase of human resistance began. Across the globe, ordinary people armed with nothing but creativity and determination began to show the galaxy's most advanced military force that sometimes the best way to fight the future was with the past. Sometimes the best way to defeat technology was with tradition. And sometimes the best way to win a war was to change the rules completely. The aliens were about to discover that conquering humanity wasn't like conquering anyone else. Because humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to prove that winning was possible. The coordinated attacks had worked better than anyone dreamed. Within 24 hours, alien communication networks across 43 cities were down. Their equipment was covered in sticky substances that seemed to eat through metal. Their soldiers were getting sick from contaminated air filters. Their computer systems were overloaded trying to track threats that came from everywhere and nowhere at once, but Admiral Zefter was learning too. After 80 months of fighting humans, he was starting to understand that this species was different. They didn't fight to control territory, they fought to cause problems. They didn't try to win battles. They tried to make every day harder than the last dot, so he changed his strategy. Instead of trying to control everything, he would control nothing. Instead of protecting fixed positions, he would make the humans come to him. Instead of responding to every attack, he would ignore the small ones and focus on the big ones. The admiral pulled all his forces back to 12 heavily defended positions around the world. Fortress cities where his most important equipment was kept. Let the humans run around in the countryside. Let them blow up empty buildings and attack abandoned checkpoints. He would wait for them to try something important. Then he would crush them completely. What Zefter didn't know was that humans had been expecting this move for months. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in what used to be the Houston Space Center. Most of the buildings were damaged from alien attacks, but the underground facilities were still intact. NASA had built them to survive hurricanes and floods. They worked just as well for surviving alien occupation. Elena had been working on the same problem for over a year. How do you coordinate millions of people when the enemy can intercept any electronic communication? How do you share information when they can break any code? How do you organize when you can't organize? The answer came from watching bees. Bees don't have generals, they don't have plans. They don't have meetings or communication systems. But somehow, 50,000 bees can work together perfectly to build hives, find food, and defend their territory. They do it through simple rules that each bee follows independently. Elena called it the swarm doctrine. Instead of trying to control human resistance from the top, she would give everyone the same simple rules and let them figure out the details themselves. Rule 1. Share everything. Every piece of information about alien technology, tactics, or weaknesses should be spread to as many people as possible as quickly as possible. Rule 2. Connect everything. Every action should help other actions. Every attack should make the next attack easier. Rule 3. Adapt everything. When something stops working, try something else immediately. Never do the same thing twice if the enemy has seen it before. Rule 4. Use everything. Every person has skills. Every building has possibilities. Every piece of junk can become a weapon. The rules spread through human networks faster than any electronic message could travel. Word of mouth, graffiti on walls, messages hidden in music and art. Within 2 weeks, resistance groups from Norway to New Zealand were following the same principles without ever talking to each other. The results were immediate and terrifying. For the aliens. In Cairo, a group of teenagers discovered that alien sensors couldn't track objects moving slower than 5 kilometers per hour. They began building an army of remote-controlled toy cars loaded with explosives. The cars moved so slowly that aliens ignored them. By the time they reached their targets, it was too late to stop them. The idea spread to other cities within days. In Mumbai, children's toys became delivery systems for computer viruses that attacked alien software. In São Paulo, remote-controlled airplanes carried devices that jammed alien communications. In Seoul, toy boats filled with acid ate through the hulls of alien patrol craft, but the toys were just the beginning. The real breakthrough came when Marcus Kim, a 17-year-old from Los Angeles, figured out how to hack alien quantum computers using principles from video games. Marcus had been studying alien communication systems for months. Not their technology, but their psychology. Aliens thought in straight lines. If A happens, then do B. If B fails, then do C. Their computer systems were incredibly advanced, but they followed the same logical patterns. Humans didn't think in straight lines. They thought in circles, spirals, and directions that had no names. Marcus realized that alien computers couldn't understand human logic. When he sent them problems that had no logical solutions, the computers tried to solve them anyway. They got caught in loops that used more and more processing power until the entire system crashed. Marcus created what he called logic bombs, simple programs that asked impossible questions. What color is the number 7? How much does happiness weigh? What is the square root of love? Alien computers tried to find answers and burned out their processors in the attempt. The logic bombs spread through alien networks like a virus. But unlike a normal virus, they didn't damage anything. They just asked questions. Millions and millions of questions that couldn't be answered but couldn't be ignored. Within a week, alien computer systems around the world were running at 10% efficiency. Their tactical computers were spending more time trying to solve unsolvable problems than coordinating attacks. Their communication networks were clogged with data that meant nothing but couldn't be deleted. Admiral Zefter watched his technological advantage disappear one system at a time. His computers were the most advanced in the galaxy, but they were being defeated by jokes, riddles, and paradoxes that human children found funny. The final straw came when resistance fighters in Tokyo discovered the aliens' greatest weakness. Not their technology, not their tactics. Their hierarchy. Confederation society was built on strict chains of command. Every alien knew exactly who was above them and below them. Every order came from the proper authority. Every decision was made by the correct rank. It was a system that had worked for thousands of years across hundreds of planets, but it had never faced humans. Yuki Tanaka was a former voice actor who had spent her career copying other people's voices perfectly. When the aliens invaded, she thought her skills were useless. Then she realized that alien communication systems had never been designed to handle deception. Yuki learned to imitate alien voices. Not just the sounds, but the authority patterns and command structures. She began sending false orders through alien communication networks. Orders that sounded completely legitimate, but sent troops to the wrong places at the wrong times. The beauty of the plan was that the aliens couldn't ignore the orders. Their entire society was built on following commands from higher authority. When Yuki told a squad of alien soldiers to guard an empty building on the other side of the city, they had to obey. When she ordered supply ships to deliver equipment to coordinates in the middle of the ocean, they had to comply. Other humans learned Yuki's techniques. Soon, alien forces were receiving contradictory orders from dozens of fake commanders. Transport ships were flying in circles. Patrols were searching for threats that didn't exist. Supply convoys were delivering equipment to resistance bases because the orders came from voices that sounded like their own officers. The Confederation's rigid command structure, which had been their greatest strength, became their greatest weakness. They couldn't function when they couldn't trust their own communications. They couldn't fight when they couldn't tell the difference between real orders and fake ones. But the humans weren't finished. Dr. Elena Vasquez had one more surprise planned. Something that would use all 4 rules of the swarm doctrine at once. Something that would turn the aliens' greatest advantage into their greatest vulnerability. The aliens controlled Earth's skies with their massive ships. Those ships were powered by fusion reactors that were completely safe under normal conditions. But Elena had discovered that normal conditions didn't include being bombarded with specific frequencies of sound at precise intervals. All across the world, humans were preparing for the largest coordinated action in their species' history, not an attack on alien forces, not an assault on their bases, an attack on physics itself. Every human with access to any kind of sound equipment was being given the same instructions. At exactly noon on January 15th, 2159, they would all play the same frequency at the same volume for exactly 17 minutes. Car horns, emergency sirens, church bells, concert speakers, anything that could make noise. 17 billion individual sound sources all playing the same note would create a resonance frequency that would shake the alien ships apart from the inside. Not through force, but through harmony, the most peaceful weapon ever created would destroy the most advanced war machines in the galaxy. The aliens had come to Earth expecting to fight an army. Instead, They had found themselves fighting an entire planet that refused to follow any rules they understood. Now they were about to learn that sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't a bomb or a bullet, sometimes it's a song. The sonic attack had worked beyond all expectations. 3 alien motherships had crashed into the ocean. 5 more had emergency landed in remote areas. The remaining ships were badly damaged and limping back to space. For the first time since the invasion began, humans could see clear sky above their cities. Admiral Zefter stood in the ruins of his command center, watching his fleet retreat through the clouds. In 2 years of fighting, he had lost more ships and soldiers than in his previous 400 conquests combined. His superiors at Confederation High Command were demanding explanations he couldn't give. How do you explain that primitive humans had defeated quantum computers with children's riddles? How do you report that your million-year-old command protocols had been broken by voice mimicry? How do you tell the greatest military force in the galaxy that you had been beaten by sounds? But Zefter was a veteran of 400 campaigns. He knew that retreat didn't mean defeat, it meant regrouping. The High Command was sending reinforcements. Real warships this time, not exploration vessels. Ships designed for total warfare against dangerous enemies. What the Admiral didn't know was that his retreat had triggered something far more dangerous than anything humans had done so far. For 2 years, the people of Earth had been fighting for survival. They had been creative, clever, and careful not to escalate the conflict beyond what they could handle. The orbital bombardment of Sydney changed everything. President Martinez stood in the ruins of what had been Australia's largest city. The blast had come without warning. No demands, no ultimatum. Just pure destruction from space. 2.5 million people had died in 17 minutes. Men, women, children, babies. All gone in an instant of alien fury. The attack had been meant to break human spirit, to show them that resistance was hopeless, to force immediate surrender. Instead, it had done something the aliens couldn't have imagined. It had removed every restraint that humanity had placed on itself. For 2 years, human resistance had followed. Unwritten rules: avoid civilian casualties. Don't use biological weapons. Don't target alien non-combatants. Fight smart, not dirty. Win the war without becoming monsters. Sydney had burned those rules to ash. General Thompson found the president staring at satellite images of the destruction. "Madam President," he said quietly, "the Joint Chiefs are unanimous. It's time to show them what we're really capable of." Martinez nodded slowly. She had hoped it would never come to this. But the aliens had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. "Execute Protocol Omega," she said. "All restrictions are lifted." Around the world, sealed orders were opened. Laboratory doors that had been locked for decades swung open. Scientists who had been working on defensive projects suddenly found themselves building offensive ones. Military units that had been fighting with improvised weapons suddenly had access to arsenals that had been deemed too dangerous to use. Dr. Sarah Chun received her new orders in a bunker beneath what used to be Beijing. She had been leading guerrilla operations for 2 years. Now she was being asked to lead something else entirely. Something that would show the aliens that they had been fighting humanity's civilized face, not its true nature. The files that arrived with her orders made her hands shake. Biological agents that could kill any carbon-based life form. Chemical weapons that could dissolve alien armor like water. Psychological warfare techniques that could drive entire species insane. Technologies that human governments had developed in secret and prayed they would never need to use, but the worst weapon wasn't in any file. It wasn't a poison or a bomb or a disease. It was an idea. A simple realization that would change how humans fought forever. The aliens weren't invaders. They were prey. Commander Jackson Torres stood on the deck of the USS Virginia, one of 12 nuclear submarines that had survived the alien attacks. For 2 years, his boats had been hiding in the deep ocean, avoiding alien sensors, waiting for orders. Now those orders had come, and they were unlike anything in naval history. The alien space elevator was their lifeline. a massive tower that stretched from Earth's surface to their orbital stations. It carried supplies, reinforcements, and communication equipment. Military doctrine said you needed orbital weapons to destroy something like that. Human doctrine said you needed creativity. Torres's submarines had been modified with new weapons. Not missiles or torpedoes, but something far simpler. Nuclear devices hidden inside shipping containers. Containers that looked exactly like the ones that moved up and down the space elevator every day. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Human infiltrators would load the containers onto the elevator's cargo system. The containers would rise to the orbital stations. Then they would detonate. Not just destroying the elevator, but taking out every alien facility in Earth's orbit. The beauty of the plan was that the aliens would never see it coming. Their sensors were designed to detect fast-moving threats, military vehicles, incoming missiles. They weren't designed to track slow-moving cargo that looked completely normal until the moment it exploded, but even that wasn't the deadliest. Part of humanity's new war plan. In laboratories around the world, scientists were working on Project Pandora, named after the ancient Greek myth about a box that should never be opened. The project was based on a simple observation about alien biology. They were carbon-based life forms, just like humans, which meant they were vulnerable to the same biological weapons. Dr. Lisa Park had been working on defensive vaccines when Sydney was destroyed. Now she was working on something else. A virus that was perfectly harmless to humans but deadly to aliens. A biological weapon that would spread through alien populations faster than they could develop countermeasures. The virus was designed to be transmitted through their air supply systems, through their food processors, through any surface they touched. It would lie dormant for weeks, spreading silently through their forces. Then it would activate all at once, killing every alien on Earth within hours. But the most terrifying weapon wasn't biological or nuclear or chemical. It was psychological. Marcus Kim had evolved far beyond hacking alien computers. Now he was hacking alien minds. 2 years of studying their behavior had taught him something crucial about alien psychology. They were a hive mind species, not controlled by one brain, but connected by shared thoughts and emotions. The connection was their strength. It was also their greatest weakness. Marcus had developed what he called psychic viruses, ideas that were designed to spread through alien mental networks like diseases, thoughts that would make them question their mission, doubts that would grow stronger the more they were shared, fears that would multiply until entire fleets were paralyzed by terror. The first virus was already spreading. A simple question that aliens couldn't stop thinking about. What if the humans are right? What if we are the monsters? What if this war is wrong? The question spread from mind to mind through the alien network. Each alien who thought it shared it with others. Each sharing made it stronger. Soon, alien soldiers were hesitating before firing their weapons. Pilots were refusing orders to attack civilian targets. Officers were questioning their commanders. The virus was turning the aliens' unity against them, making them weak where they had been strong, making them doubt where they had been certain. But all of these weapons were just preparation for humanity's final revelation, the thing that would show the galaxy what humans really were when all the restraints were removed. For 2 years, aliens had been fighting humans who were trying to minimize casualties, humans who were fighting defensively, humans who were holding back their true nature because they still believed in mercy and rules and civilization. Sydney had taught them that mercy was a luxury they couldn't afford, that rules were for species that had something left to lose. That civilization was what you protected, not what you fought with. Now, the aliens were about to face humanity's true face. Not the face of builders and dreamers and explorers. The face of the apex predator that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain by being more ruthless, more adaptable, and more creative at killing than anything else the planet had ever produced. The aliens had thought they were fighting a young civilization. They were wrong. They were fighting evolution itself. 4 billion years of survival instincts wrapped in technology and guided By intelligence that had learned to turn any situation into an advantage, the war was about to begin for real. And the aliens were about to learn why humans were the only species on Earth that other species feared when they met them in the dark. The Confederation reinforcement fleet arrived in Earth's orbit like a storm of metal and fire, 200 warships, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built, each one armed with weapons that could crack planets. Admiral Zefter watched from his flagship as the massive fleet took position around Earth. This was what real Confederation power looked like. Not exploration ships or occupation forces, but pure military might. Ships that had destroyed rebellions across the galaxy. Ships that had turned entire star systems into examples for others who might think about resisting. Fleet Admiral Korath commanded the reinforcements. He was ancient even by Confederation standards. He had been conquering planets when humans were still learning to make fire. His ships had burned 1,000 worlds. His reputation alone had convinced 50 species to surrender without fighting. Admiral Zefter, Korath's voice carried the authority of absolute power, your reports make no sense. How can primitive humans resist our technology? Zefter tried to explain the improvised weapons, the unpredictable tactics, the complete refusal to follow logical military doctrine. But Korath just laughed. It was the sound of metal scraping against stone. You have been fighting civilians, Korath said. I will show you how to fight a war. The bombardment began at dawn. Not targeted strikes on military installations. Not careful attacks on strategic positions. Total destruction from orbit. Every major city, every industrial center, every place where humans gathered in large numbers, the energy beams fell like rain. Each blast could vaporize a city block. The ships fired continuously for 6 hours. When the bombardment stopped, half of human civilization was burning. Korath watched the destruction with satisfaction. This was how you dealt with rebellious species. You showed them that resistance meant extinction. You gave them a choice between surrender and death. Now they will submit, he told his officers, or we will finish what we started. But something was wrong. The human communication networks hadn't gone silent. Instead, they were busier than ever. Signals were flying between the surviving cities. Coded messages were bouncing off satellites. Emergency broadcasts were reaching every corner of the planet. The bombardment hadn't broken human resistance. It had triggered something else entirely. President Martinez stood in the deep bunker that had become humanity's war room. Half the world was burning above her head. 50 million people had died in 6 hours. The alien fleet was preparing for another bombardment that would finish the job, but the president wasn't thinking about surrender. She was thinking about revenge. Execute everything, she said quietly. Every weapon, every plan, every protocol we've ever developed. Hold nothing back. Around the world, humans who had been waiting for this moment began to move. Not soldiers or resistance fighters, but ordinary people who had been preparing for this day since the invasion began. Teachers and doctors and farmers who had learned to build weapons from household chemicals. Children who had been trained to sabotage alien equipment. Grandparents who had memorized the locations of every alien facility on Earth. The first phase began in the oceans. Commander Torres's submarines launched their nuclear cargo containers toward the space elevator. 12 nuclear devices disguised as shipping supplies. Each one programmed to detonate at different altitudes as they rose toward the orbital stations. The aliens detected the launches, but not the threat. Their sensors showed cargo containers moving at normal speed along normal shipping routes. Nothing that looked like weapons or missiles. By the time they realized what was happening, the containers were already halfway to orbit. The explosions came in sequence. First at the base of the space elevator, then at increasing altitudes as each container reached its programmed detonation point. The massive structure, which had taken the aliens 5 years to build, collapsed in 17 minutes, but that was just the beginning. As the space elevator fell, Dr. Park's biological weapons activated across the planet. The virus had been spreading through alien air systems for weeks. Now it began to kill. Not quickly or dramatically, but steadily and inevitably. Alien soldiers simply stopped moving. One by one, they fell where they stood. The virus spread faster than any medical response could counter it. Within hours, every alien on Earth's surface was dead or dying. The invasion force that had controlled the planet for 2 years was gone in a single day, but the real terror was still coming. Marcus Kim's psychological viruses had been working through the alien fleet's mental network for days. Simple doubts and questions that spread from mind to mind. Now those doubts exploded into full panic. Alien crews began to question their orders. Pilots refused to fire on civilian targets. Officers started demanding explanations for their mission, the aliens' greatest strength. Their mental unity became their greatest weakness. When one alien felt fear, they all felt it. When one began to doubt, they all began to doubt. When one broke under the psychological pressure, the breakdown spread through the entire fleet. Ship after ship began to malfunction as their crews lost the ability to function. Weapon systems powered down, navigation computers shut off. Life support systems failed as no one could remember how to operate them. The psychological virus was eating the fleet from the inside, but humanity wasn't finished. They had one more weapon. The deadliest one of all. The remaining humans had been building it for months. Not in factories or laboratories, but in garages and basements and abandoned buildings. Millions of small devices, each one simple, each one harmless by itself. But together they formed a weapon that could reach across space itself. It was based on the same principle as the sonic attack that had destroyed the first wave of alien ships: resonance, harmony, the idea that when enough sources produce the same frequency, they can shake apart anything. But this time the target wasn't alien ships. It was space itself. Every human with access to any kind of energy source had been given the same instructions. At exactly noon, Earth time, they would activate their devices, car batteries, solar panels, wind generators, anything that could produce electrical current, all connected to simple transmitters that would broadcast the same signal into space. The signal wasn't a weapon in any normal sense. It was just a radio frequency. But it was the exact frequency that alien ship computers used to communicate with each other. When billions of human transmitters began broadcasting that frequency at the same time, they would overload every alien communication system in the solar system. But the real genius was what happened next. The overloaded communication systems would try to reset themselves, all at the same time, all using the same frequency. The signal would bounce from ship to ship, growing stronger with each transmission, the aliens' own communication. Network would become a weapon that would tear their fleet apart. At exactly noon, Earth time, the signal began. 17 billion individual transmitters all broadcasting the same frequency. The signal reached the alien fleet in seconds. Every ship's communication system overloaded simultaneously. The aliens tried to shut down their communications, but it was too late. The signal was already bouncing between ships, creating feedback loops that grew stronger with each transmission. The aliens' own quantum computers were amplifying the signal until it reached power levels that could melt metal. One by one, the alien warships began to explode, not from external weapons, but from their own communication systems overloading. The ships that had survived 1,000 battles across the galaxy were being destroyed by radio signals from a planet they had thought was defeated. Fleet Admiral Korath watched his fleet die around him. Ships that had never been damaged in battle were tearing themselves apart. Crews that had conquered entire sectors were fleeing in escape pods. The greatest military force in Confederation history was being defeated by primitive radio transmitters. In the end, only 12 ships survived. 12 out of 200. They fled Earth's orbit as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. The survivors would carry news back to the Confederation. News that would change everything. Humans weren't just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something new, something dangerous, something that could turn any technology against itself. Something that could win wars by changing the rules completely. The Confederation had expected to find compliant subjects. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant. A species that treated every defeat as a learning experience. A species that could turn anything into a weapon. A species that refused to accept that anything was impossible. As the alien ships disappeared into space, humans emerged from their bunkers and shelters. They looked up at clear skies for the first time in over 2 years. They had not just won a war. They had announced to the galaxy that Earth was no longer a target. It was a threat. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same.